Ethan Miller's office, early morning. The city of New York is already buzzing with life outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan Miller, 36, the CEO of one of the largest financial firms in the city, stands looking out at the skyline. He's dressed in his usual sharp, expensive suit, his mind focused on the next big deal. Yet, despite the luxury and success surrounding him, there's a palpable tension in the air. Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to keep his work life and personal life separate. Ford Financial Group was his empire, his creation, and for the past decade, his relentless pursuit of success had driven him to the top. The multi-million-dollar deals, the long nights in the office, the meetings with investors, it had all paid off. But lately, something had begun to gnaw at him. The phone buzzed on his desk, breaking his train of thought. He looked down at the screen. It was a text from Sophie Carter, his colleague and business partner in a major joint venture that was about to close. "Ethan, we need to talk. The project deadline is tomorrow, and I'm still waiting on your approval for the final numbers. Can we meet this afternoon?" He quickly replied with a short acknowledgement, his mind already back to the million-dollar deal looming over him. The European merger was about to finalize, and he needed every detail to align perfectly. But something was pulling at him, something more important than the deal. Ethan's phone rings again. This time, it's a call from Emily Ford, his ex-wife. He hesitates for a moment before picking up. "Ethan, we need to talk about Ethan." Emily's voice was tight, filled with concern. Ethan's heart sank. Ethan, their 10-year-old son, had been living with Emily since their divorce 3 years ago. Though they had tried to keep things amicable for their son's sake, there was always tension beneath the surface. The last thing Ethan wanted to hear was more bad news about his son. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice steady but tinged with worry. "He's been struggling at school, Ethan." Emily's voice cracked slightly. "There's been some bullying, and he's withdrawing. I know you're busy, but I need you here." "He needs you." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had been so focused on his work that he hadn't noticed how much his son was suffering. He'd always told himself that once the business was stable, he'd have more time for Ethan, but he hadn't planned on this. "I'll come by today." "Emily, I'll pick him up from school." Ethan's words felt hollow, but he needed to act fast. That afternoon, Ethan drives to Ethan's school, the weight of his decision sinking in. The car ride is filled with the hum of the engine, but in Ethan's mind, all he could hear was the sound of his son's voice, the image of him withdrawing into himself. The divorce, the long hours at work, it had all contributed to this distance between them. When he arrived at the school, he parked in the lot and walked toward the entrance. As he stepped inside, the familiar hum of a school day surrounded him, students chatting, teachers hurrying by, but for Ethan, it all felt like a distant echo. He walked into the office, where he was directed to Ethan's classroom. The door opened, and he saw his son sitting quietly at his desk, looking down at his notebook. His small shoulders were slumped, and he seemed lost in his own world. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said, trying to sound cheerful as he walked over to his son. Ethan looked up, his eyes dull. "Hi, Dad," he muttered quietly, not meeting his father's gaze. There was a distance between them, one that had grown ever since the divorce. Ethan's heart broke at the sight of his son, so withdrawn and distant. Ethan knelt down beside him. "I'm here now, Ethan." He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "We're going to work through this together, okay?" Ethan didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, he finally spoke. I don't like school anymore, Dad. His voice was barely above a whisper. The kids make fun of me. They say I'm weird. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. How had he let it get this far? His mind raced as he thought back to the many business trips, the endless meetings, the months spent locked in his office. He had been too absorbed in his work to notice the cracks forming in his son's life. I'm sorry, son. I should have been here more. Ethan's voice cracked, the weight of his mistakes coming crashing down. But I'm here now. I promise I'll make it right. Later that day, Ethan meets Emily at a nearby cafe to discuss Ethan's situation. The conversation is strained, the remnants of their broken marriage still hanging in the air. I can't keep doing this alone, Ethan, Emily said, her voice low and frustrated. He needs you more than ever. You can't keep running from your responsibilities. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know, Emily. I'm sorry. I've been so caught up in work that I forgot what matters. His voice softened. I'll be there for him. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Emily's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of resentment. It's not just about showing up. He needs consistency. You need to be there, not just when it's convenient. Ethan nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. I understand. I'll make sure I'm here for him. I won't let you down again. As he walked out of the cafe, Ethan's mind was swirling. His life had been a series of compromises: his career, his marriage, his relationship with his son. Now, it was time to face the consequences of those choices. But the question was it too late to rebuild what had been broken? The following day, Ethan returns to work, but his mind isn't on the project. He sits at his desk, staring at the glowing screen, but all he can think about is the moment he shared with his son. The distant, empty feeling inside him grows as he wonders if he's lost his chance to truly connect with Ethan. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Sophie Carter, his business partner. She was calling to discuss the project deadline, but this time Ethan's mind wasn't focused on the numbers or the deal. He had his priorities straight now, and the work, for once, wasn't the first thing on his mind. I'll call you back, Sophie. I need to handle something first. With the sound of Ethan's heavy breathing as he looks out the window, feeling the burden of his decisions weighing on him. Ethan Miller's office, early morning. The city of New York is already buzzing with life outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Ethan Miller, 36, the CEO of one of the largest financial firms in the city, stands looking out at the skyline. He's dressed in his usual sharp, expensive suit, his mind focused on the next big deal. Yet, despite the luxury and success surrounding him, there's a palpable tension in the air. Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to keep his work life and personal life separate. Ford Financial Group was his empire, his creation, and for the past decade, his relentless pursuit of success had driven him to the top. The multi-million-dollar deals, the long nights in the office, the meetings with investors, it had all paid off. But lately, something had begun to gnaw at him. The phone buzzed on his desk, breaking his train of thought. He looked down at the screen. It was a text from Sophie Carter, his colleague and business partner in a major joint venture that was about to close. Ethan, we need to talk. The project deadline is tomorrow, and I'm still waiting on your approval for the final numbers. Can we meet this afternoon? He quickly replied with a short acknowledgement, his mind already back to the $1 million deal looming over him. The European merger was about to finalize, and he needed every detail to align perfectly. But something was pulling at him. something more important than the deal. Ethan's phone rings again. This time, it's a call from Emily Ford, his ex-wife. He hesitates for a moment before picking up. Ethan, we need to talk about Ethan. Emily's voice was tight, filled with concern. Ethan's heart sank. Ethan, their 10-year-old son, had been living with Emily since their divorce 3 years ago. Though they had tried to keep things amicable for their son's sake, there was always tension beneath the surface. The last thing Ethan wanted to hear was more bad news about his son. What happened? Ethan asked, his voice steady but tinged with worry. He's been struggling at school, Ethan. Emily's voice cracked slightly. There's been some bullying, and he's withdrawing. I know you're busy, but I need you here. He needs you. Ethan's stomach tightened. He had been so focused on his work that he hadn't noticed how much his son was suffering. He'd always told himself that once the business was stable, he'd have more time for Ethan, but he hadn't planned on this. I'll come by today. Emily, I'll pick him up from school. Ethan's words felt hollow, but he needed to act fast. That afternoon, Ethan drives to Ethan's school, the weight of his decision sinking in. The car ride is filled with the hum of the engine, but in Ethan's mind, all he can hear is the sound of his son's voice, the image of him withdrawing into himself. The divorce, the long hours at work had all contributed to this distance between them. When he arrived at the school, he parked and walked toward the entrance. As he stepped inside, the familiar hum of a school day surrounded him, students chatting, teachers hurrying by, but for Ethan, it all felt like a distant echo. He walked into the office, where he was directed to Ethan's classroom. The door opened and he saw his son sitting quietly at his desk, looking down at his notebook. His small shoulders were slumped, and he seemed lost in his own world. Hey, buddy, Ethan said, trying to sound cheerful as he walked over to his son. Ethan looked up, his eyes dull. Hi, Dad, he muttered quietly, not meeting his father's gaze. There was a distance between them, one that had grown ever since the divorce. Ethan's heart broke at the sight of his son, so withdrawn and distant. Ethan knelt down beside him. I'm here now, Ethan. He placed a hand on his son's shoulder. We're going to work through this together, okay? Ethan didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, he finally spoke. I don't like school anymore, Dad. His voice was barely above a whisper. The kids make fun of me. They say I'm weird. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. How had he let it get this far? His mind raced as he thought back to the many business trips, the endless meetings, the months spent locked in his office. He had been too absorbed in his work to notice the cracks forming in his son's life. I'm sorry, son. I should have been here when you needed me. Ethan's voice cracked, the weight of his mistakes coming crashing down. But I'm here now. I promise I'll make it right. Later that day, Ethan meets Emily at a nearby cafe to discuss Ethan's situation. The conversation is strained, the remnants of their broken marriage still hanging in the air. I can't keep doing this alone, Ethan, Emily said, her voice low and frustrated. He needs you. He's not just struggling at school, he's struggling with you. Ethan's jaw tightened. I know I haven't been there. But I've been trying to build something for us, Emily. Something that could give Ethan a future. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with frustration. A future? You think Ethan's future is tied to the deal you made? She sighed deeply, her voice trembling. He needs his father, Jackson. Not your business. Not your money. Jackson's jaw tightened. He had heard this before. Over the years, he had always convinced himself that he was doing the right thing by working harder, by pushing himself to be the best. But now, sitting across from Emily, he couldn't deny that she was right. He had missed out on everything that truly mattered. "I want to fix this. I want to be a better father, Emily," Jackson said, his voice hoarse. "But I don't know where to start." That night, Jackson returns to work, but his mind isn't on the project. He sits at his desk, staring at the glowing screen, but all he can think about is the moment he shared with his son. The distant, empty feeling inside him grows as he wonders if he's lost his chance to truly connect with Ethan. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Sophie Carter, his business partner. She was calling to discuss the project deadline, but this time Ethan's face kept flashing before his eyes. His mind was no longer on the deal. He had to change, to be there for his son. "I'll call you back, Sophie. I need to handle something first." With the sound of Ethan's heavy breathing as he looks out the window, feeling the burden of his decisions weighing on him. Ethan's office. The morning after the tense conversation with Emily. The city skyline outside the window is bathed in soft, early morning light. Ethan stands looking out, his mind racing with thoughts of his son. The conversation with Emily, and the mounting pressure at work. Ethan had always believed that work could fix everything if he made enough money. If he built enough success, everything else would fall into place. But now, standing in his office, looking at the busy city below, he realized that his career, no matter how successful, couldn't replace the time he had lost with Ethan, family, his son, his broken marriage. His responsibility was becoming more important than ever. He reached for his phone, typing out a quick text to Sophie Carter, his business partner. She had been insistent that they meet to discuss the final steps of their joint venture. And although Ethan was overwhelmed by personal issues, he knew they couldn't afford to delay the project any longer. "Sophie, let's meet this afternoon to finalize the numbers." "I'll make time." As he pressed send, a wave of guilt washed over him. Sophie had been patient, but he could tell she was growing frustrated with his increasing absences and lack of attention. He had always been the one pushing for more deals, more revenue, more growth, but now he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been neglecting the most important people in his life. Sophie's apartment. The atmosphere inside is quiet, almost too quiet. Sophie sits on the couch, her phone in her hand. She stares at the screen, then puts it down, rubbing her temples. The stress of the past few weeks had been taking its toll on her. Sophie Carter was used to being in control. As a high-ranking executive in the company, she had always been the one to handle pressure with grace and precision. But lately, the weight of her personal life had been overwhelming. Her mother's health was rapidly declining. Sophie had been the one to take care of her, handling medical appointments, managing her finances, and keeping up the facade that everything was fine. But it wasn't. Her mother was gravely ill, and Sophie was keeping it hidden, not just from Ethan, but from everyone. She knew that if Ethan found out the truth, it would change everything. It would change the way he saw her, the way they worked together. Her personal struggles were things she could control, but family dramas, especially her mother's illness, was something she couldn't fix. The following afternoon, Ethan arrives at Sophie's apartment to discuss the business deal. Sophie greets him with a polite smile, but Ethan can tell something's off. She's distracted, her usual confidence replaced by a sense of unease. "Sophie, are you okay?" Ethan asked, his voice genuine, sensing the tension in the room. Sophie quickly waved off his concern. I'm fine. Let's get started. She gestured to the documents on the table, but Ethan could see that her mind wasn't on the business at hand. Sophie, really? You don't have to do this. If you're not ready, we can reschedule, Ethan said, his tone softer now. He had been paying attention to the signs Sophie hadn't been herself lately, and it was starting to worry him. Sophie hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the edge of the table. I appreciate that, Ethan, but I've got this. Let's move forward with the plan. Ethan sat down opposite her, but his concern wasn't easing. He knew something was wrong. Sophie had always been composed, but there was a vulnerability now that she couldn't hide. Her body language, her eyes, they were telling a different story. If you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Ethan's voice was steady, sincere. He had grown fond of Sophie, not just as a colleague, but as a friend. But he couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something important. Sophie looked at him, her expression softening for a brief moment. She opened her mouth to say something, but then closed it, as if unsure how to start. I appreciate it, Ethan. Really, I do. There was an awkward silence, and Ethan could see the internal conflict brewing inside her. It wasn't just about the business deal. There was something personal weighing on Sophie, something that she wasn't ready to share. Later that evening, Ethan is back at his apartment, sitting in front of his desk, the lights from the city reflecting off his office windows. His mind is racing, trying to make sense of the situation. His phone buzzes. It's a message from Emily. Ethan's therapist called. He's still struggling. We need to talk about his future. Can we meet tomorrow? The message hit him like a ton of bricks. His son needed him, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the weight of his absence. But the business, the project, the investors, it was all pulling him in different directions. How could he balance everything? He sat back in his chair, his fingers resting on the edge of the desk. The choices were becoming harder. It was no longer just about making a living. It was about making a life with his son, with Sophie, with everything he had neglected for so long. Could he fix it all before it was too late? The following day, Ethan walks into Sophie's office to check on the progress of their project. She's sitting at her desk, papers scattered in front of her, but she looks up when he enters, her face pale. The strain is visible. Sophie, what's going on? Ethan asked, walking over to her desk. Sophie exhaled slowly, avoiding his gaze. Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice faltered. I've been keeping a secret, and it's starting to affect my work. Ethan raised an eyebrow, a mix of concern and curiosity. What secret? Sophie, you don't have to carry this alone. If there's something going on, I'm here to help. Sophie hesitated before speaking, her voice barely a whisper. My mum? She's been sick for a while now, and I've been taking care of everything. The business, her. It's been too much, and I didn't want to drag you into it. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. This was why she had been distracted, why she had been pushing him away. Sophie had been carrying this burden alone, afraid to let anyone see the cracks in her armor. Sophie, I'm so sorry. You don't have to do this alone. Ethan's voice softened, his concern for her growing deeper. We can work together. I'm here for you. Sophie looked up, her eyes filled with unshed tears. Thank you, Ethan. I don't know how to handle this. ... Everything's falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. Ethan walked around the desk, sitting beside her. You don't have to fix it alone. We'll figure it out together. Ethan's apartment, evening. The glow of the city lights is barely visible through the closed blinds. Ethan stands by the window, looking out at the skyline, deep in thought. His phone buzzes on the table beside him. It's a message from Sophie Carter. Ethan, can we meet tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something important. Ethan stared at the message for a moment. The weight of the words felt like a silent warning. The tension between him and Sophie had been building ever since their last conversation. Sophie had opened up about her mother's illness, but there was still something she wasn't telling him. He could feel it. The sense of urgency from Sophie's message unsettled him. But he knew it wasn't just about business anymore. Their personal lives were intertwined, and the emotional distance that had grown between them needed to be addressed before it tore everything apart. He glanced at the clock. 8:30 p.m. The office would be empty by now. But his mind was elsewhere. Ethan, Sophie, the weight of their personal struggles was starting to overwhelm him, and he needed to figure out how to move forward. The next day, Jackson meets Sophie at a cafe. The place is quiet, with soft jazz music playing in the background. Sophie is already sitting at a table near the window, her hands folded nervously in front of her. Sophie looked up as Ethan approached, her expression tense, but also filled with something that he couldn't quite place. She stood up to greet him, but there was a sadness in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. Ethan, thanks for meeting me. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. She seemed like she wanted to say more, but hesitated. Ethan sat down across from her, giving her a reassuring smile. Of course, Sophie. What's going on? You've been distant lately, and I'm worried. Sophie avoided his gaze, instead looking down at the cup of coffee in front of her. There's something I haven't told you yet. I didn't want to burden you with it, especially with everything going on at work. But I can't keep pretending like everything is fine. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He had known something was off with Sophie, but this was different. Her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something far more vulnerable. Sophie, you know you don't have to carry this on your own. Whatever it is, I'm here for you. Ethan reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. Sophie took a deep breath and finally looked up at him. My mum, she's not just sick, Ethan. She's terminal. And I've been handling everything alone. She paused, tears starting to well in her eyes. I've been so focused on keeping it all together at work, but I'm falling apart inside. I didn't want you to see me like this, to see that I can't handle it all. Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't realized how much Sophie was carrying. All the meetings, the long hours, they were nothing compared to what she was going through at home. Double quotes, Sophie, ... Ethan's voice was thick with emotion. You don't have to hide this from me. I'm here for you, and I can't stand the idea of you going through this alone. Sophie wiped her eyes, the vulnerability she had been hiding now fully exposed. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to drag you into my mess. I thought I could manage it, all work, family, everything. But it's too much. And I've been so afraid of losing control. Her voice cracked. But now, I'm afraid of losing everything. Ethan's mind is racing as he processes what Sophie has just shared. The weight of the situation is heavier than anything he had imagined, but his instincts tell him that he can't turn away now. Sophie, we don't have to figure everything out right this second, Ethan said, his voice soft and reassuring. We can tackle this together. I don't want you to feel like you have to do this alone. Sophie looked at him, her eyes searching for sincerity, for reassurance. But Ethan, ... Her voice dropped to a whisper. This isn't just about my mum. There's more. Things with my family. I don't know how to fix it. Ethan leaned in slightly, his brow furrowed with concern. What do you mean? What else are you hiding, Sophie? Sophie hesitated, and for a long moment the air between them was thick with unspoken words. Finally, she spoke, the weight of the truth pressing down on her. My family has been falling apart for years. My mum's illness just made everything worse. My dad left when I was young, and my brother, he's been fighting with me over the inheritance. Sophie's voice wavered. I've been trying to keep it all together, trying to pretend everything is fine, but I can't do it anymore. Ethan felt the gravity of her words. It wasn't just her mother's illness. It was the entire foundation of her life, crumbling around her. No wonder Sophie had been so distant. No wonder she had been hiding behind her work. She had been fighting battles he had no idea about. Sophie, you don't have to carry all of this by yourself. Ethan reached across the table again, this time taking both of her hands in his. You've been trying to protect everyone, but you don't have to. Let me help you. Sophie looked at him, her eyes full of hesitation. I don't want to drag you into this, Ethan. You've got enough on your plate with your company. Ethan shook his head, his grip on her hands tightening. You're not dragging me into anything, Sophie. This isn't about business anymore. It's about what really matters. I'm here for you, and I always will be. That evening, after their conversation, Ethan returns home. He stands in front of his apartment window, looking out at the city. His mind is a whirlwind of emotions, and the weight of Sophie's struggles weighs heavily on him. But the realization that he's ready to be there for her, to be a part of her life, fills him with a strange sense of purpose. Ethan's phone buzzed once more. It was a message from Emily, his ex-wife. Ethan. I think we need to talk about Ethan. He's been acting out again. Can you come over tomorrow? Ethan sighed, running his hand through his hair. His son needed him. Sophie needed him. And he was caught between both worlds. For the first time in years, Ethan realized that he had to balance the impossible: his family, Sophie, and his company. The choices he made now would shape the future of his relationships and his career. The road ahead wasn't clear, but Ethan was ready to face it, no matter how difficult. Ethan's apartment, morning. Ethan sits at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hands, staring out the window at the bustling city below. His mind is a whirlwind of thoughts: Sophie's family issues, his son's struggles, and the demands of his company. Ethan had always thought of himself as a man who could compartmentalize his life. Work, family, personal life. He had been able to manage it all until now. Now, everything seemed to be colliding at once. The pressure of running Ford Financial, the emotional weight of his son's needs, and Sophie's hidden struggles, all of it was weighing on him. He glanced at his phone. There was a message from Emily about Ethan's therapy session later in the day. He's been quiet again. Please make time today. I think he really needs to talk to you. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. His son needed him more than ever. Yet there was still something about Sophie's situation that gnawed at him. She had been hiding her struggles for too long, and now, more than ever, he needed to decide if he could truly be there for her, despite the emotional toll. Later that morning, Ethan arrives at the therapist's office to meet with his son. Ethan, the office is cozy, quiet, and warm, much different from the cold, sterile environment of his office. Ethan walked into the waiting room and was greeted by the receptionist. "Ethan Miller?" she asked, looking up from her desk. "Yeah," Ethan nodded, adjusting his jacket. "I'm here for my son." The therapist, Dr. Harris, came into the room, smiling warmly as she greeted Ethan. "Ethan, good to see you. Please, come in." As they entered the office, Ethan could see that his son was already sitting on the couch, his legs crossed, staring blankly at the floor. Ethan's heart sank. His son, his little boy, seemed so distant. "Hey, champ. How are you?" Ethan asked softly, sitting down beside him. Ethan didn't respond immediately, but after a moment, he shifted on the couch. "I'm fine, Dad." Ethan could see the walls Ethan had built up around him, the same walls he had erected in his own life. It hurt, but he knew he had to break them down. "I know it's been tough lately, buddy, but I'm here now." Ethan's voice cracked, the guilt overwhelming him. "I want to help." Ethan glanced up at his father, but there was a faint sadness in his eyes. "Why weren't you here before?" he asked quietly. "Why didn't you notice what was going on?" Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. His son's words cut deep. I didn't see it, Ethan. I was caught up in everything else, and I should have been here. I'm sorry." He reached out, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "But I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he was really seeing his son. The boy who had been so strong, so quiet, was now reaching out, desperately needing his father's support. Later that afternoon, after the therapy session, Ethan heads to Sophie's apartment. He's been thinking about their last conversation and knows that he needs to do more than just offer sympathy. Sophie's family troubles are more complicated than he realized. As Ethan approached Sophie's apartment, he could feel the unease in the pit of his stomach. He had to be there for her. There was no question about that, but he was also battling his own personal demons. Would she let him in? Would she finally open up about everything? He rang the doorbell, and Sophie answered almost immediately. Her face was pale, her eyes tired, but there was a flicker of hope when she saw him standing there. "Ethan." Sophie stepped aside to let him in. "Thanks for coming." Ethan entered, taking a deep breath as he looked around. The apartment was cozy, but the air felt heavy, like the weight of unspoken words hung in the room. "Sophie, I know you've been going through a lot," Ethan said softly, his voice genuine. "I know you haven't wanted to talk about it, but I'm here for you. I want to help, I just don't know how." Sophie sat down on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, she was silent, but then she spoke, her voice shaking. "Ethan, I've been carrying this weight alone for too long. I didn't want to burden you with it, but..." She stopped, her eyes looking down at the floor. "My mum, she's not just sick, Ethan. She's dying. And I've been trying to take care of everything on my own. My father left when I was young, and my brother, we haven't spoken in years. It feels like I'm falling apart." Ethan sat beside her, his heart breaking for her. She had been holding this all inside, pretending everything was fine, when the truth was that her entire world was collapsing around her. "Sophie, you don't have to do this alone," Ethan said, his voice firm but gentle. "I'm here for you. I want to help, not just with the work, but with everything." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly. "I don't want you to pity me, Ethan. I don't want anyone to know how broken I am. Ethan reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. I'm not pitying you, Sophie. I'm here because I care about you. We're in this together, whether you like it or not. Sophie looked up at him, her expression softening. She had been so guarded for so long, but now, for the first time, she felt the possibility of letting go, of allowing someone else to share her burden. Thank you, Ethan. I don't know what I would do without you. Later that evening, Ethan stands at his apartment window, looking out at the sprawling city below. The glow of the streetlights seems distant, and the noise of the city fades away. He thinks about everything Sophie has told him, about Ethan's struggles, and about the life he is trying to rebuild. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel the weight of his business pressing down on him. Family, that was what mattered now. Not the mergers, not the deals, not the growth of his company. His son, Sophie, his future, the road ahead wasn't easy. But for the first time, he felt like he was making the right choices. He would be there for his family, and he would be there for Sophie. And as he looked out at the city, he finally understood what true success meant. Ethan's office, early morning. The morning light reflects off the glass windows, casting a soft glow over the room. Ethan sits at his desk, reviewing the final numbers for the sustainable energy project. His mind, however, is elsewhere. His thoughts are consumed by the conversations he's had with Sophie and his son. The phone buzzes on his desk. Ethan picks up the phone and sees a text from Clara Davis. The investors are getting impatient. Ethan, we need to finalize the deal by the end of the week. Ethan stares at the message, feeling a pang of guilt. He knew the pressure was mounting, the company needed him, and the investors were starting to grow skeptical of his new direction. But then, his thoughts shift back to Sophie, to her struggles, to everything she had confided in him. Family versus business. It was a battle he didn't have an answer to. Later that afternoon, Ethan arrives at Sophie's apartment. She opens the door to greet him, but the weight of the conversation is clear in her eyes. Ethan, thanks for coming. I didn't want to drag you into this, but I don't know who else to turn to, Sophie says softly, stepping aside to let him in. Ethan walks in, the tension between them palpable. He had promised to be there for her, but now the situation felt more complicated than ever. Sophie had already been carrying the weight of her family's struggles on her own, and now it was spilling over into their professional lives. He could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the constant worry of trying to keep everything together. Sophie, you don't have to do this alone. Ethan's voice is firm, but his concern is evident. What's going on? Talk to me. Sophie glances at him, biting her lip as she looks away. She hesitates for a moment, gathering her thoughts. It's my brother, she begins. We've been fighting over my mum's estate. He wants everything, and I can't let him take it all. It's the only thing left from our family, but it's tearing me apart. Ethan sits down beside her, his hand gently resting on hers. You don't have to fight this battle alone. Sophie shakes her head, her voice trembling. I don't want to bring you into this, Ethan. I don't want to complicate everything we've worked for. But it's all just ... Too much. Ethan looks at her, his heart heavy with empathy. He knew what it felt like to keep up appearances, to pretend like everything was fine when it wasn't. Sophie had always seemed so strong, but now the cracks were showing. Sophie, I'm already here, and I want to be here for you, Ethan says, his voice steady. This isn't just about business or the project we're working on. It's about you. If you need help, I'll be here. We can figure this out together. For the first time, Sophie looks him in the eyes, the weight in her gaze softening slightly. I don't want to burden you, Ethan. I don't want to be a problem. Ethan gently squeezes her hand. You're not a burden, and you're not alone. We'll get through this, but you need to let me in. The next day, Ethan returns home, his mind still on Sophie's words. The situation with Sophie is weighing on him, but he can't ignore the pressing issue with his son either. Ethan sits down with Emily in their living room to discuss Ethan's recent struggles. Ethan's been more distant than usual. Emily begins, her voice filled with concern. He's been more quiet and withdrawn. His teacher says he's not participating as much in class. Ethan runs his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of his son's struggles. I know, I've been so caught up in everything, and I've let him down. I promised I'd be there for him, but work just keeps taking over. Emily looks at him, her eyes soft but firm. Ethan needs you more than anything right now. He needs his dad to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. Ethan looks at her, feeling the pressure building. He had been so focused on his career, so absorbed in his ambitions, that he hadn't realized how much he had been neglecting his son. His family was falling apart, and he was too late to notice. I'm going to spend more time with him, Emily. I'm going to make it right, Ethan says, determination in his voice. I can't keep letting work take priority. Emily nods, though there's still a hint of doubt in her eyes. He needs you to follow through on that, Ethan. Not just say the words. He needs you there. Later that night, Ethan sits in his apartment, trying to balance the stress of his work with the emotional weight of his personal life. The phone buzzes again. It's a message from Sophie. Ethan, I need you. My brother's taking legal action. He's pushing for a court hearing next week. I can't handle this alone anymore. Ethan reads the message twice. Sophie was reaching out for help. She had been trying to handle everything on her own, but now it was too much. He couldn't ignore her anymore. He had to decide. Would he prioritize the project, or would he put everything on hold for Sophie? The weight of the decision was overwhelming, but the answer was clear to him now. The following day, Ethan meets Sophie at her apartment again, ready to finally step in and help. Sophie is pacing, her face drawn with stress. Ethan, I can't do this anymore, Sophie says, her voice breaking. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm drowning. Ethan walks up to her and places his hands on her shoulders. You're not alone, Sophie. I'm here. We'll figure this out. Together. Sophie looks at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Thank you, Ethan. I don't know how to thank you for this. Ethan smiles softly. You don't have to thank me. I'm here because I want to be. Let's take this one step at a time, all right? Later that evening, Ethan stands by his window, looking out at the city again. The weight of everything feels different now. He had made the decision to step up, not just in his work, but in his personal life. He wasn't going to keep running anymore. Sophie's troubles, his son's struggles, and the demands of his business were all intertwined. But for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like he was ready to face them head on. He was done putting work first. As he looked out at the city, he knew the road ahead would be challenging, but it was the road he had to take. For his family, for Sophie, for himself. Ethan's office, late afternoon. The office is quieter than usual, the hum of the city outside barely audible as the sun sets. Ethan stands by the window, looking out at the city, his mind far away. The weight of the past few weeks, the tension with Sophie, the pressure at work, and the growing distance with his son was beginning to take its toll. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he felt truly at peace. Ford Financial Group was his pride, his life's work. But with the latest merger, the sustainable energy project, and Sophie's family crisis, everything seemed to be crumbling. Sophie's personal struggles, her broken family, had become a part of his life now, and he didn't know how to manage it all anymore. His phone buzzed on his desk. It was a message from Clara Davis, his colleague and business partner. "Ethan, we need to talk. The board is getting anxious about the project. You've been distant lately, and we need clarity. The deadline is coming up fast." Ethan read the message and sighed. Clara was right, he had been distracted. Between the tension with Sophie and his responsibilities as a father, he had barely managed to focus on his work. He couldn't afford to lose the support of the board, but every decision now seemed like a double-edged sword. He couldn't keep pushing Sophie away, but he also couldn't let the business fail. Something had to give. The following morning, Ethan arrives at Sophie's apartment. It's been a few days since they last spoke, and he feels the distance between them growing. Sophie hasn't been herself. Lately, she's been distracted, overwhelmed, and Ethan can tell that her family problems are weighing heavily on her. Sophie opens the door, her tired eyes meeting his. She gives him a small but strained smile. "Ethan, thanks for coming." Ethan steps inside, but the air in the apartment feels heavy. The once warm and inviting space now feels like a reflection of Sophie's inner turmoil. She hasn't said much about the situation with her brother and her mother's illness lately, but Ethan knows it's only getting worse. "How's everything going?" Ethan asks, trying to break the ice. Sophie hesitates before answering, her voice shaky. "Not great." She runs a hand through her hair, looking away from him. "My brother's lawyer is pushing for full control of the estate. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm exhausted." Ethan steps closer, his concern deepening. "Sophie, you don't have to do this alone. I've told you, I'm here for you. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Sophie looks at him, her eyes searching his face. She's been so strong for so long, but now Ethan can see the cracks in her armor. She lets out a sigh, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. It feels like everything is falling apart." Her voice cracks as she speaks, the weight of everything catching up to her. Ethan moves to sit beside her on the couch, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to carry this burden by yourself, Sophie." He pauses, his voice softening. "Let me help you. Let me in. You've been carrying this alone for too long." For a long moment, Sophie says nothing. Then she finally looks at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I've been so afraid to ask for help. I don't want to seem weak or like I'm failing. But I can't do this anymore." Her voice trembles, and she finally lets herself cry. Ethan wraps his arms around her, pulling her into a comforting embrace. He feels the weight of her pain, the anguish she's been hiding from everyone, including him. "You're not failing, Sophie. You're doing your best, and I'm here, always." Ethan whispers, holding her tightly the next day. Ethan meets with Clara in the office to discuss the future of the sustainable energy project. The board meeting is only a few days away, and the pressure is building. Clara is sitting across from him in the conference room, reviewing the numbers and reports. Ethan knows she's been frustrated with his lack of focus recently, and he can feel her eyes on him as he takes his seat. Ethan, the board is concerned. They want more than just promises. They want results. You've been distant. Clara's voice is sharp, but not unkind. If you're going to lead this company through this shift, you need to be all in. Ethan takes a deep breath, knowing that this moment is critical. He can't afford to let Clara down. But at the same time, his mind keeps drifting back to Sophie and her family problems, to Ethan's struggles at home. I know, Clara. I've been distracted, but I'm committed to this. We'll get the results. But I need the board's support. We need to show them that we're not just shifting for the sake of it, but because this is the future. Ethan's voice is steady, his gaze locked with hers. This was his chance to prove that he could balance both his work and personal life. Clara nods, though there's still a hint of skepticism in her eyes. All right, but don't make me regret this, Ethan. The clock's ticking, and we need a concrete plan. Ethan leaves the meeting feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. The business is his life, but his family, his son, Sophie, they mattered more. And now it was time for him to make a decision that would change everything. Later that evening, Ethan returns to his apartment, where Ethan, his son, is waiting for him. The sight of his son's smile lifts his spirits, but he knows the distance between them is still there. Hey, buddy. How was school today? Ethan asks, sitting down beside his son on the couch. Ethan shrugs, avoiding his father's gaze. Fine, Ethan sighs, watching his son carefully. Look, I know things have been hard, and I know I've been busy. But I'm here now. I'm going to make it right. Ethan looks up at him, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I just want you to be here, Dad. I don't want to keep waiting. Ethan's heart aches at his son's words. He couldn't keep making excuses. The promises he had made, the time he had missed it, was all catching up to him. I'm here now, buddy, and I'm not going anywhere. Ethan wraps his arm round his son, pulling him close. Later that night, Ethan stands by the window again, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that the balance between work and family would always be a challenge. But for the first time, he was ready to face it head on. He wasn't going to let Sophie, his son, or his company fall apart. As the city lights twinkled below, Ethan finally felt a sense of clarity. He would make the tough decisions. He would be there for Sophie. He would be there for his son. He was determined to prove that he could balance both his work and his personal life, and that meant making sacrifices, taking risks, and putting his family first. He was ready to step up. Ethan's office, the morning after the intense conversation with his son. The sky outside the window is overcast, as if the weather mirrors the storm Ethan is feeling inside. He sits at his desk, going over the numbers for the sustainable energy project. But his mind keeps drifting back to his family. Ethan stared at the glowing screen in front of him, but his mind wasn't on the numbers. The weight of his son's struggles, the pressure from the investors, and Sophie's personal crisis kept him distracted. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Sophie. Ethan, we need to talk. My brother is pushing harder for the estate. I don't know how much longer I can handle this. He read the message and sighed, feeling the growing tension in his chest. Sophie had been dealing with so much on her own, and he could see the toll it was taking on her. He had promised to help her, but he wasn't sure if he could manage everything the company. His son, and now Sophie's family drama. But he knew that he couldn't back away from her now. Ethan arrives at Sophie's apartment in the late afternoon. She opens the door, her eyes tired, her face drawn from the weight of everything she had been carrying. Ethan can tell that she hasn't been sleeping well, and the pressure is starting to show. "Ethan, thanks for coming." Sophie greets him, her voice quiet, but filled with something softer than usual. She steps aside to let him in. Ethan walks inside, taking in the state of her apartment. It's neat, but it feels off. There's an emotional heaviness in the air, the kind of tension you can feel but can't see. Sophie leads him to the living room, where they sit down. "Sophie, I'm here for you." "Whatever you need," Ethan says gently, his tone firm yet comforting. Sophie looks at him, her face clouded with concern. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this." Her voice cracks. "I'm trying to keep everything together. Work, my mum, my brother, but it's all falling apart." Ethan reaches across the table, placing his hand over hers. "You don't have to keep doing it alone. Let me help you." Sophie looks at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't want to drag you into this. This is my mess, Ethan, and it's getting worse." Ethan leans in, his voice soft but firm. "Sophie, you're not dragging me into anything. You don't have to face this alone." She pulls her hand away, running her fingers through her hair. "My brother's lawyer is pushing for the estate. He wants everything. I can't stop him, Ethan. I don't know what to do. I'm failing." Ethan watches her closely, his heart heavy with empathy. She's carrying so much weight, and he knew he couldn't let her bear it alone. "You're not failing, Sophie. You're doing your best. I've been where you are, feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But you don't have to carry it all alone anymore." Sophie looks at him, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I feel like I'm drowning." Ethan reaches over, placing his hand on her shoulder. "I won't let you drown. Let me help you with this. Let's talk to a lawyer, get the right advice. We'll figure this out, together." The next day, Ethan spends the afternoon organizing the paperwork. Sophie has brought him and makes calls to find a lawyer to help with the estate issue. Sophie is at home, spending time with her mother. But Ethan can tell that Sophie is still overwhelmed. Ethan's mind keeps racing with thoughts of Sophie's family situation. The business still needs his attention, but Sophie's pain feels just as urgent. He can't keep ignoring it. His work had consumed him for so long, but now he had to find a way to be there for both Sophie and his son. His phone buzzes again. This time, it's Emily. "Ethan, I think it's time we talked about moving forward. Ethan's been asking more about when you'll be home, and I think we need to set some boundaries. He needs stability." Ethan sighs, rubbing his temples. Stability, that was something he had neglected for so long. His son was struggling, and it wasn't just about picking him up from school or attending therapy sessions anymore. It was about being consistent, being there in a meaningful way. He quickly types a response to Emily. "I'm coming over later today. Let's talk. I know I've been distant, but I'm going to fix that." Ethan stares at the message for a moment before setting his phone down. He had promised his son, and he needed to make it right. But how could he balance it all? Scene: later that evening, Ethan arrives at Emily's apartment. Ethan is anxious about how the conversation with his son will go, but he knows it's necessary. He wants to make things right, but it's hard to know where to start. Emily opens the door with a soft smile, but her eyes reveal the stress that's been building up between them. "Thanks for coming over, Ethan. We need to talk about Ethan." Ethan nods, stepping inside. "I know, I've been thinking a lot about it. I've been absent, and I need to make it right." He pauses, looking at her. I want to spend more time with him, Emily. I'm not going to let work come first anymore. Emily looks at him for a moment before speaking. I know you mean well, but Ethan needs consistency. He needs to see that you're really there, not just when it's convenient. Ethan sighs, feeling the weight of her words. I get that, Emily. I've made mistakes, but I'm here now. And I'm going to show him that I'm not going anywhere. Emily nods, her expression softening. Good, but it's not just about showing up. He needs to feel like you're really present. Ethan takes a deep breath, nodding. I will. I promise. That night, Ethan sits by the window in his apartment again, looking out over the city. The lights twinkle below, but for the first time, Ethan feels the weight of the decisions he's made. His phone buzzes once more. It's a message from Sophie. Ethan, I don't know what I'd do without you. The lawyer said we have a chance. I couldn't have done this without your help. Thank you. Ethan smiles, feeling a sense of relief. He had made the right choice. Not just for his company, but for Sophie. For his son. For himself. He responds quickly. We're in this together, Sophie. I'm not going anywhere. Ethan's apartment, the morning after a restless night. The weight of everything, the project, his son, Sophie, feels heavier than ever. Ethan stands by the window, gazing out at the city below. The view is the same, but everything feels different. For the first time, Ethan is truly aware of the crossroads he finds himself at. Ethan had spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about everything that was at stake. The business, his family, Sophie, and most of all, his relationship with Ethan. He couldn't ignore it anymore, the guilt, the pressure, the fear of failure. But he knew one thing for certain. He could no longer afford to make the same mistakes. He needed to be present, not just for his company, but for his son and for Sophie. Ethan walks into Sophie's apartment later that morning. He knows their conversation will be difficult, but he can't keep avoiding it. He needs to know where they stand, and more importantly, he needs to know if they can make it through the challenges ahead. Sophie is sitting on the couch when Ethan enters, her face worn with exhaustion. The weight of her family issues, the business pressure, and her own emotional turmoil is written all over her. She looks up as Ethan enters, her eyes tired but hopeful. Ethan, thanks for coming, Sophie says softly, but there's a hint of nervousness in her voice. Ethan sits down beside her, his gaze steady but filled with concern. Sophie, I've been thinking a lot about everything. About you, about us, about where we go from here. I can't keep balancing everything on my own. We need to make a decision, and I need to know if we can handle this together. Sophie looks down, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. Ethan, I don't want to drag you into my mess. You've been helping me more than I could ever ask for. But I don't know if I can keep asking you to take on my problems. Ethan leans forward, his expression softening. Sophie, I'm not going anywhere. I told you that already. You're not dragging me into anything. We're a team. I've seen what you've been going through, and I want to help. But I need you to be honest with me. Can we do this together? Sophie looks up at him, her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, she lets her guard down completely. I want to believe that we can, but I'm scared. Scared that if I let you in, I'll lose myself. I've been doing this alone for so long, and I don't know how to share the burden. Ethan places a hand gently on hers. You don't have to do it alone anymore, Sophie. I'm here for you, and you don't have to lose yourself in the process. We'll figure this out together, step by step. Sophie's shoulders finally relax, the tension in her body easing. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ethan, I've been so afraid, but you've made me see that it's okay to lean on someone. Ethan smiles, his heart lifting with a sense of relief. We're in this together, Sophie. No more running from it. We face it head on. That evening, Ethan and Sophie sit in the living room, talking late into the night. They discuss the future, both professionally and personally. They talk about what they want in life, what they're willing to fight for. Ethan talks about the vision he has for Ford Financial, and Sophie speaks of her hopes for her family, for healing, and for the future. As the night winds down, Sophie leans back on the couch, looking at Ethan with a sense of calm she hasn't had in weeks. I'm glad you're here. Ethan, really, I've been holding so much in, but now, I feel like there's hope. Ethan takes her hand, squeezing it gently. Me too. I've been so focused on my work, on growing the business, but I see now that it's not enough. Family, relationships, those are the things that really matter. Sophie smiles softly, her eyes glistening with gratitude. And that's why I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to face whatever comes next with you. The next day, Ethan meets with Clara in the office. There's still work to be done, but for the first time, Ethan feels confident that he can handle it all. The project is still on track, but he's made a decision to prioritize family, and that means focusing on the things that truly matter. Clara enters the office, her usual nonsense attitude in place. Ethan, we need to talk about the final pitch to the investors. I think we're almost there, but I need you to be all in. This is the make-or-break moment. Ethan looks up from his desk, his expression calm and collected. Clara, I'm ready, but I'm not just focusing on the numbers anymore. I've made some changes. I'm committing to a new direction, not just for the company, but for my life. Family, purpose, that's where my focus is now. Clara raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised. That's a big shift, Ethan. But if it works, I'm on board. Let's make it happen. Ethan smiles, feeling the weight lifting off his shoulders. We'll make it work, Clara, together. Later that evening, Ethan returns home to his apartment, feeling a sense of peace he hasn't felt in a long time. He sits in front of the window, watching the city lights below, feeling at peace with the decisions he's made. His phone buzzes. It's a message from Emily. Ethan. Ethan's been asking for you again. He misses you. Can you come by tomorrow? Ethan smiles, his heart swelling. He had made it right. He had promised his son, and now he was keeping that promise. The following day, Ethan meets with Emily and Ethan at the park. They spend time together as a family. Ethan and his son finally connecting in a way that felt real. Sophie calls him later, thanking him for everything he's done. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you. Ethan smiles, his voice warm. We're just getting started, Sophie. I'm here for you, always. The final shot shows Ethan standing by the window in his apartment, once again, this time with a sense of peace and purpose. The city sprawls before him, but this time it feels different. He's no longer running after success. He's learned that true success comes from balanced family, love, and purpose. Ethan turns away from the window and looks at the pictures of his son on the shelf. His son Sophie, the people he loved, that was the future he was building. The road ahead was still long, but now He had everything he needed to face it.